Some stories are about finding answers in places we least expect. They are about journeys that change not just what we know, but who we are. This is one of those stories. It is the story of a man named Maurice Bucaille. He was born in France, a country rich with history and culture. He grew up in a Christian family, where faith was part of the world around him. But Maurice was a man of science. He was drawn to the world of facts, of proof, and of what could be seen and understood through careful study. This path led him to become a brilliant doctor, a skilled surgeon who dedicated his life to healing others. He was very respected in his field. Dr. Bucaille was known for his sharp mind and his dedication to medicine. He spent his days in operating rooms and clinics, dealing with the tangible realities of the human body. He saw life and death up close. For him, the world operated on clear scientific principles. Every effect had a cause, and every mystery could, with enough time and research, be solved. His world was one of microscopes, scalpels, and medical journals. Faith, for him, was a separate part of life, perhaps a matter of tradition or personal comfort. It was not something he expected to find in the precise, logical world of his scientific work. He was comfortable in his identity as a French Christian and a man of science. But life has a way of presenting us with questions that challenge our most firmly held beliefs. It can place a puzzle before us that sends us down a path we never imagined we would walk. For Dr. Bucaille, this puzzle would not come from a living patient or a new medical discovery. Instead, it would arrive from the distant past, from the sands of ancient Egypt. An extraordinary event was about to unfold, one that would connect his modern scientific knowledge with a story thousands of years old. This event would force him to look beyond his medical charts and into the pages of a sacred book he had never considered reading before. This journey would test everything he thought he knew. It would lead him to question the very boundaries between science and religion. Was it possible that these two worlds, often seen as separate or even in conflict, could actually meet? Could an ancient text hold scientific truths that were only being discovered in the modern age? These were the questions that would soon consume Maurice Bucaille. His life, once neatly divided between his work and his background, was about to be transformed. He was about to embark on a quest that would redefine his understanding of God, of history, and of himself. The story begins not in a church, but with a king from long ago. In the 1970s, something remarkable happened in France. An ancient king, a pharaoh from Egypt, was sent to Paris for a special examination. This was no ordinary guest. It was the mummy of Pharaoh Merneptah, believed by many to be the pharaoh from the time of Moses. His body had been preserved for over 3,000 years. The Egyptian government wanted French scientists to study the mummy to learn more about how he died and to help preserve him for the future. Dr. Maurice Bucaille, with his expertise, was chosen to be the lead surgeon in this incredible project. He was going to perform an autopsy on a king who had ruled centuries before the great empires of Rome or Greece. For Dr. Bucaille, this was a unique scientific challenge. He and his team of experts had access to the most advanced technology of their time. They carefully unwrapped the ancient linens, revealing the fragile body of the pharaoh. Their goal was to be like detectives, piecing together clues from the distant past. They conducted X-rays, took samples, and analyzed every detail with immense care. The main question they wanted to answer was how this powerful ruler had died. The mummy was in a remarkable state of preservation, which allowed for a very detailed investigation. It was a moment where modern science met ancient history in the most direct way possible. As Dr. Bucaille examined the body, he noticed something strange. There were traces of salt left on the mummy. This was a significant clue. It suggested that the pharaoh had died in the sea. The salt crystals were evidence of a sudden death by drowning, and the body was quickly recovered from the water. This finding perfectly matched the famous story of the pharaoh who chased Moses and the Israelites across the Red Sea. The story says that the sea closed in on the pharaoh and his army, and they all drowned. Dr. Bucaille's scientific findings seemed to confirm this ancient tale. He had found physical proof of a dramatic event from the past. The discovery was exciting. Dr. Bucaille was proud of what his team had accomplished. They had solved the mystery of the pharaoh's death. He prepared a detailed report of his findings, explaining the evidence of drowning and the salt preservation. He felt that his work was complete. He had used science to uncover a historical truth. He expected this to be the end of the story, but a conversation with one of his colleagues would soon open a new chapter, one that he could never have anticipated. The story of the pharaoh was not over for him. In fact, it was just beginning a much more personal and profound journey. After completing his detailed report on the pharaoh's mummy, Dr. Bucaille was discussing his findings. He shared the incredible story of how the scientific evidence pointed to the pharaoh drowning in the sea. He was proud of this conclusion, a triumph of modern forensic science. Then, a colleague made a comment that would change everything for him. His colleague, who was a Muslim, told him not to get too excited. He said that the story of the pharaoh's drowning and the preservation of his body was already mentioned in the Quran, the holy book of Islam. Dr. Bucaille was skeptical. How could a book written over 1,400 years ago know this specific detail? Dr. Bucaille's mind, trained in logic and evidence, immediately questioned this claim. He was familiar with the story of Moses from the Bible, which he had known since his childhood. The Bible speaks of the pharaoh and his army drowning in the sea, but it says nothing about the preservation of the pharaoh's own body for future generations to see. This detail was missing. He thought his colleague must be mistaken. It seemed impossible that an ancient religious text could contain such a precise piece of information, a fact that he himself had only just confirmed with the most advanced scientific tools available in the 20th century. His curiosity, the same curiosity that made him a great scientist, was ignited. He couldn't let the question go. He needed to see the proof for himself. That night, he was told about the specific verse in the Quran. It was in a chapter named Yunus, or Jonah. The verse directly addressed the pharaoh at the moment of his death. It said, "So today we will save you in body, that you may be to those who come after you a sign." This was astonishing. The verse didn't just say he would drown, it explicitly stated that his physical body would be saved as a sign for people in the future. Dr. Bucaille was deeply shaken. He read the verse again and again. The words on the page mirrored his own scientific conclusions perfectly. He, in his state-of-the-art laboratory in Paris, had just become one of those who come after and had witnessed the sign. The mummy of Merneptah lying in a museum was the physical evidence. How could the Quran have known this? This single verse created a powerful conflict in his mind. It was a piece of data that did not fit into his understanding of the world. It was a direct challenge from an ancient text to a modern scientist, and it sent him on a new path of discovery. The discovery about the pharaoh's body was a turning point for Maurice Bucaille. It was like finding a key to a door he never knew existed. He realized that this could not be a simple coincidence. A man of science cannot ignore data, even if it is uncomfortable or challenges his worldview. So, he decided to embark on a new and deeply personal research project. He would study the Quran, not as a man of faith, but as a scientist. His goal was to investigate whether there were other scientific statements in the Quran, and to analyze them with the same rigor and objectivity he applied to his medical work. He needed to understand the origin of this knowledge. To do this, he knew he had to study the Quran in its original language. Translations could have errors or interpretations that might change the meaning. So Dr. Bucaille, a man in his 50s, dedicated himself to learning Arabic. This was a difficult task, but his determination to find the truth was strong. He wanted to read the words exactly as they were revealed, without any filter. He approached the sacred text like a scientific paper, looking for facts, descriptions, and statements about the natural world that he could compare with modern science. He was on a quest for knowledge, wherever it might lead him. As he began his study, he set a clear rule for himself. He would only consider verses that described natural phenomena in a way that could be verified by modern science. He was not interested in miracles that were beyond scientific explanation. He wanted to find statements about topics like cosmology, geology, biology, and human reproduction. He wanted to see if the descriptions in the Quran, a text from the 7th century, were compatible with the discoveries of the 20th century. He was preparing to subject an ancient scripture to the intense scrutiny of a modern scientific mind. His journey into the Quran was a solitary one at first. He spent countless hours in his study, surrounded by books on science, history, and now, Islamic theology. He was entering a new world of knowledge. He was no longer just a surgeon who healed bodies. He was becoming an explorer of the soul and the universe, guided by an ancient text. Each page he turned, each verse he translated, brought new questions and sometimes astonishing answers. His initial skepticism was slowly being replaced by a profound sense of wonder and intellectual excitement. The small puzzle of the pharaoh had opened up a much larger universe of inquiry. As Dr. Bucaille delved deeper into his study of the Quran, He was honestly amazed by what he found. He discovered that the Quran contained incredibly precise descriptions of various scientific phenomena. One of the most striking areas was embryology, the study of the development of the human embryo. Since he was a medical doctor, this was of course his area of expertise. The Quran describes the stages of human creation in the womb with stunning accuracy. It speaks of the embryo as something that clings to the uterine wall, like a leech. The Arabic word used, alaka, has this meaning, and it perfectly describes the initial stage of implantation. The text goes on to describe the next stage as a chewed lump of flesh, or muga. This is a remarkable description of what the somites, the early divisions of the embryo, look like. They actually resemble teeth marks in a piece of gum. After this, the Quran mentions the formation of bones and then the clothing of these bones with flesh or muscles. These stages, in this exact order, clinging drop, chewed lump, bones and then flesh, perfectly match the discoveries of modern embryology. Dr. Bucay knew that in the 7th century, no one had microscopes. It was impossible for any human to have observed these stages of development. But his exploration did not stop with the creation of man. He found verses that spoke about the origin of the universe. The Quran mentions that the heavens and the earth were a joined entity and we separated them. This concept of a single primary mass that split apart is strikingly similar to the modern Big Bang theory, which describes the universe expanding from a single, incredibly hot and dense point. Again, he was faced with knowledge that seemed far ahead of its time. How could a man living in the Arabian desert 1,400 years ago have known about the fundamental principles of cosmology that scientists only began to understand in the last century? Furthermore, he found verses describing the water cycle, the formation of mountains, and even the nature of the sun and the moon. The Quran correctly describes the moon as a body that reflects light, nur, while the sun is described as a source of light, a burning lamp, siraj. This distinction is scientifically precise and honestly was not common knowledge in ancient times. Each discovery was like another piece of a giant puzzle falling into place. The evidence was piling up, suggesting that the information in the Quran could not have come from the human knowledge available at the time it was written. This was a profound and unsettling conclusion for a man of science. As Maurice Bucaille's research progressed, it was natural for him to compare the Quran with the holy book he was most familiar with, the Bible. As a man raised in a Christian culture, the stories and teachings of the Old and New Testaments were part of his heritage. He approached this comparison with the same scientific objectivity he applied to everything else. He was not looking to prove one book right and another wrong. He was simply a seeker of truth, analyzing the data before him. He wanted to see if the Bible contained similar scientific insights, or if there were significant differences in its descriptions of the natural world. When he examined the Old Testament, particularly the book of Genesis and its account of creation, he found what he considered to be major contradictions with modern science. For example, the creation story describes the creation of the earth and heavens in 6 days, with day and night existing before the creation of the sun. From a scientific standpoint, this was problematic. He also pointed to the account of the Great Flood, which the Bible presents as a global event covering the highest mountains. Modern geology and archaeology do not support the idea of a universal flood of that scale. He concluded that the biblical narrative contained statements that were incompatible with established scientific facts. This was not a criticism of the Bible's spiritual value. Dr. Bucaille respected its role as a foundational text for billions of people. However, from his specific viewpoint as a scientist looking for scientific accuracy, he found discrepancies. He noted that the Bible was written and rewritten by many different authors over many centuries. It was passed down through oral traditions and multiple translations, which could have allowed for human errors and alterations to enter the text. He saw the biblical accounts as products of their time, reflecting the understanding of the universe that people had in those ancient ages. In contrast, he found the Quran to be completely different in this regard. In all his studies, he could not find a single verse in the Quran that contradicted established modern science. The descriptions of the cosmos, of biology, of geology, they were all in harmony with contemporary knowledge. He also noted that the Quran states it is the direct word of God, unchanged and perfectly preserved since the time it was revealed. This claim, combined with the scientific information he was uncovering, presented a powerful argument for its divine origin. The comparison between the two texts became a crucial part of his intellectual journey, pushing him further toward a radical new conclusion. This entire process of discovery was not easy for Maurice Bucaille. It was a time of great internal conflict and deep questioning. Every new piece of evidence he found in the Quran challenged the foundations of his life. He was a respected French surgeon, a man of Western culture, and a Christian by upbringing. His research was leading him down a path that was foreign and isolating. He had to confront his own biases and the assumptions he had held for his entire life. The scientist in him was compelled by the evidence, but the man in him was surely filled with doubt and uncertainty about what these discoveries meant for his personal identity. He must have asked himself countless questions. Could he be wrong? Was he interpreting the verses correctly? Perhaps he was just seeing patterns where none existed. As a rigorous scientist, he would have constantly tried to disprove his own theories. He would have searched for alternative explanations. Could the Prophet Muhammad have learned this advanced knowledge from someone else? He investigated this possibility thoroughly, but historical records showed that scientific knowledge at that time, whether in the Byzantine or Persian empires, was not advanced enough to account for the information in the Quran, especially on topics like embryology. His doubt was a sign of his sincerity. He was not rushing to a conclusion. He was wrestling with a profound truth that was slowly revealing itself to him. This period of his life was likely filled with long nights of study and reflection. He was caught between two worlds, his past and a future he could not yet imagine. The logical, factual evidence was pointing in one direction, while his cultural and emotional ties pulled him in another. This internal struggle is a key part of any true transformation. It is in the fire of doubt that the strongest convictions are often forged. His interest grew with every question he answered. What started as a simple inquiry into one verse about a pharaoh had grown into a comprehensive study of a holy book. The more he read, the more he felt that he was not just reading a book, but was in a dialogue with its author. The text seemed to anticipate the questions of a modern scientist and provide answers that were both simple and profound. His initial skepticism was melting away, replaced by a growing sense of awe and reverence. The heart of the seeker was beginning to overcome the doubt of the scientist, leading them both toward the same destination. After years of intensive research, careful analysis, and deep personal reflection, Maurice Bucaille arrived at a conclusion he could no longer deny. The evidence was overwhelming. The Quran, a book revealed in the 7th century, contained scientific knowledge that humanity would only discover centuries later. For him, there was only one possible explanation for the origin of this knowledge. It could not have come from a human being. It could not have been the product of its time. For Dr. Bucaille, the scientific accuracy of the Quran was a clear sign of its divine origin. It had to be a revelation from God. This conclusion was not just an intellectual agreement, it was something that touched him at the core of his being. The journey that started with a dead pharaoh had led him to a living truth. He had followed the evidence with the discipline of a scientist, and it had led him to the doorstep of faith. He could no longer remain a detached observer. The knowledge he had gained demanded a response. It was time for him to make a decision that would change the course of his life forever. This was the moment where the man of science and the seeker of truth became one. In a profound and personal moment, Maurice Bucaille made the decision to embrace Islam. He declared the Shahada, the testimony of faith, which states that there is no God but Allah, and that Muhammad is his messenger. This was the culmination of his long journey. His conversion was not an emotional impulse. It was the result of a long, logical, and evidence-based investigation. He had found a faith that did not require him to abandon his reason or his scientific mind. In fact, it was his scientific mind that had led him to this faith. He found a perfect harmony between the world of science and the world of religion. His conversion was a deeply personal transformation, but it also had a public impact. He chose to share his findings with the world. In 1976, he published his famous book, The Bible, the Quran and Science. In this book, he laid out his entire journey, his research, and his conclusions. He presented his evidence clearly and methodically, inviting others to examine the facts for themselves. He was no longer just Dr. Maurice Bucaille, the French surgeon. He had become a powerful voice, a bridge between two worlds, sharing a story of how a scientific investigation led to a profound spiritual awakening. Maurice Bucaille's story did not end with his conversion or the publication of his book. His work created a powerful legacy that continues to resonate around the world today. He passed away in 1998, but his journey remains a source of inspiration and a topic of discussion for millions. His book has been translated into many languages and has been read by people from all backgrounds: Muslims, Christians, and people of no faith. It opened up a new field of study, often called Bucailleism, which focuses on exploring the relationship between modern science and the Quran. He showed that faith and reason do not have to be enemies. His legacy is that of a bridge builder. He created a connection between the scientific community and the world of Islamic faith. For many Muslims, his work provided a modern, intellectual validation of their beliefs. It gave them a new language to express their faith in a scientific age. For people outside of Islam, his story served as a compelling invitation to look at the Quran from a new perspective. He encouraged a dialogue based on mutual respect, intellectual curiosity, and a shared search for truth. He demonstrated that it is possible to be a person of deep faith and a rigorous scientist at the same time. Of course, his work has also faced criticism. Some scholars and scientists disagree with his interpretations or his conclusions. They argue that the verses he quoted are open to different meanings or that his connections to science are forced. But this debate is also part of his legacy. He started a conversation. He challenged people to think, to question, and to explore the sacred texts for themselves. Whether people agree with him or not, he forced them to engage with the question of how science and religion relate to one another. A good story does not always provide all the answers. Sometimes its greatest power is in the questions it makes us ask. In the end, the story of Maurice Bucaille is a timeless human story. It is a story about the power of an open mind and a sincere heart. It shows us that truth can be found in the most unexpected places, in an ancient mummy, in the verses of a holy book, or in the quiet space of our own minds. It reminds us that the universe is full of signs for those who are willing to see them. Maurice Bucaille's journey from a French Christian surgeon to a believer who found peace in Islam is a powerful testament to the idea that the quest for knowledge and the quest for God can sometimes be the very same path.